In our headlines on this Thursday afternoon, February 1st, here on the peninsula. The U.S. Federal Reserve announces intentions to maintain its benchmark lending rate at an over two-decade high, between 5.25 and 5.5%, as it awaits tangible proof that American inflation is decelerating to 2%. Meanwhile, South Korea holds on to its growth momentum in January, with exports expanding 18% on year, bolstered by chips and cars to hit above $54 billion, allowing for trade surplus of $300 million. Also, on the local front, President Yoon Suk-yeol says now is the golden hour to reform Korea's healthcare infrastructure, with $7.5 billion set aside for essential medical services. U.S. monetary policymakers have decided to hold steady for a fourth session in a row the target range for their benchmark lending rate, adding that a cut in rate is unlikely in the near future. Here's our economics correspondent, Shin Ha-young.
After the U.S. Federal Reserve's first two-day meeting of this year, the FOMC on Wednesday announced a fourth consecutive rate freeze. With this latest decision, the benchmark interest rates in the U.S. remain in the 5.25% to 5.5% range. Since before the meeting, the market's focus has been on the timing of rate cuts from the Fed. There have been rising expectations of a March rate cut after the Fed last month hinted at 3 possible rate cuts in 2024. However, Fed Chairman Jerome Powell expressed doubts about a cut next month, saying it's less likely that the committee will reach a level of confidence about inflation, which would allow rates to be cut by the time of the March meeting.
It's not that the 6-month data isn't low enough. It is. It's just a question of, can we take that with confidence that we're moving sustainably under 2%?
The Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, which excludes food and energy, for last month rose 2.9% from the year before. This is the first time it has dropped to a 2% level since March 2021. The Fed chairman also said there is more concern about the risk of inflation staying above 2% than there is for major inflation spikes. One expert says it's because of the sacrifice needed to achieve the Fed's inflation target.
Chairman Powell has always said that their goal is 2% inflation, not inflation around 2%, but 2% on the dot. So there has been a lot of concern that getting from 3% to 2% will be very, very difficult, and it will involve a lot of sacrifice.
Meanwhile, the latest Fed rate freeze means the key interest rate gap between South Korea and the U.S. remains at 2 percentage points.
BOK will have to delay the rate cuts if they were planning to cut the rates during the first half of the year. But the good thing is that Chairman Powell is giving solid signals that he will lower the rates sometime this year unless inflation goes back up.
During Thursday's emergency macroeconomic meeting in South Korea, Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok said that there is growing uncertainty about the timing of rate cuts in other countries, adding that the government will remain vigilant regarding the situation. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
And in local news, Korea is off to a good start on the trade front, with findings for January showing a tangible expansion in exports on the back of chips and cars. Our correspondent An Sung-jin has the latest.
The month of January provided positive signs for South Korea's exports. Data from the Trade Ministry on Thursday showed that exports saw an on-year increase of 18%, reaching $54.69 billion. As imports dropped by 7.8%, the trade balance maintained its surplus of $300 million. It's the first time in 20 months that on-year exports growth reached a two-digit figure. Most export products saw a rise, including displays, home appliances, ships, and mechanical products. However, the sharp increase was mostly geared by a strong performance in the semiconductor industry, which was at its highest value since December 2017. Chip exports increased by 56.2% on-year as demand increased for high-value-added memory chips. Auto exports also reached a record high in January as demand for hybrid of electric vehicles surged. On the back of a strong semiconductor industry, exports to China saw a rebound. The on-year increase rate was positive for the first time in 20 months. A recovery in demand for TVs and LCD shipments also contributed. Exports to the U.S. were strong too, seeing an on-year increase of 26.9%. The Trade Ministry stated that these figures are a good start toward achieving record-high exports for this year, which follows Trade Minister An Dok-kun at the 2024 World Trade Strategy meeting last week, pledging to come up with strategies to respond to the changing global market based on digital transformation, population change, carbon neutrality, and supply chain reconstructions. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Staying with trade, annual sales of eco-friendly cars here in Korea surpassed 550,000 units for the first time last year. Seoul's Transport Ministry says this is a jump of nearly 25% on year, and the majority of these cars were hybrid and over 70% were Korean-made models. The ministry's findings also show sales of these so-called green cars have surged by over 100,000 units each year from 2021. In other news, President Yoon Suk-yeol says now is the golden hour to reform Korea's healthcare infrastructure. The statement was shared during the 8th policy briefing open to the public earlier on this Thursday that was centered on medical care. He also pledged not to retreat in the face of resistance to reform. Now, pundits are linking the pledge to opposition regarding plans to expand the medical school quota. President Yoon has claimed access to health care, regardless of region, is key to ensuring balanced national growth, as many shared stories of hardships in seeking emergency care. The government has vowed to set aside over $7.5 billion to better address related challenges. And as touched upon during our newscast back on Wednesday, President Yoon Suk-yeol has cast grave light on North Korea's adamant pursuit of nuclear weapons and more. Our defense correspondent Jin Jong-oh covers his comments.
South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol has labeled the North Korean regime as the only irrational group in the world that has legalized the preemptive use of nuclear weapons. The remarks came as Yoon on Wednesday presided over the annual Integrated Defense meeting at the Blue House.
상식적인 정권이라면 핵을 포기하고 주민들이 살 길을 찾겠지만 북한 정권은 오로지 세습 전체주의 정권 유지를 위해 물불을 가리지 않고 있습니다.
Yoon also believes North Korea may attempt to interfere with the April general election in South Korea, as he noted that the regime has, quote, worked tirelessly to bring down South Korea's liberal democratic system for the past 70 years.
올해도 접경지 도발, 무인기 침투, 가짜뉴스, 사이버 공격, 후방 교란 등 선거 개입을 위한 여러 도발이 예상되고 있습니다.
The meeting took place amid heightened tensions on the Korean peninsula following a series of missile provocations by North Korea. It brought together around 170 people from the government, military, police, and the National Intelligence Service, with civilians also taking part for the very first time. President Yoon called for strengthened cooperation in defense among all parts of society as the attendees discussed ways to respond to potential North Korean threats. Yoon echoed the sentiment later in the day in a meeting with key military commanders. He stressed the importance of liberal democracy and called on soldiers to be mentally armed with a clear view of the country and its security. The president said the military should be prepared to crush North Korea's provocations through an overwhelming response. Jin Jong-oh, Arirang News.
On the international front, the fate of the UN agency in charge of aiding Palestinian refugees but accused of aiding Hamas hangs in limbo as Israel calls for its closure while the UN asks for continued assistance. Our Lee Sing-jae has the latest.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Wednesday called for the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency to be shut down, saying that a number of its officials were involved in the October 7th attacks.
And I think it's time that the international community and the UN itself understand that UNRWA's mission has to end.
However, the Israeli Prime Minister called for other UN agencies and other aid agencies to replace UNRWA in order to solve problems in Gaza properly. Despite reports of UN Palestinian Refugee Agency's officials taking part in the October 7th attacks, UN Chief Antonio Guterres called on countries to continue to contribute to the agency, calling it the backbone of the humanitarian response in Gaza. Guterres stressed the inhumane conditions faced by Gaza's 2.2 million people. The comments come as a number of donor countries, including the agency's biggest donor, the United States, halted their contributions. Meanwhile, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and top Israeli official Ron Dermer held talks in Washington on Wednesday. The two discussed the flow of humanitarian aid to Gaza and the status of efforts to get hostages released. The meeting also comes as the U.S. has been working with Israel and Qatar to reach a deal for the release of hostages held by Hamas. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And the U.S. says the drone attack at its base in Jordan this past weekend that killed 3 American soldiers was led by the Islamic Resistance in Iraq, an umbrella group of the Iran-backed militants. White House National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby said the U.S. believes the attack was, quote, planned, resourced and facilitated by this particular group. He also reaffirmed the Biden administration's intentions to retaliate, adding that President Joe Biden was weighing his options. Iran, for its part, on Wednesday vowed no U.S. threat against Tehran will go unanswered. Separately, Russian President Vladimir Putin says a U.S. missile system was used to shoot down a Russian military transport plane last week. Speaking at a rally on Wednesday, he claimed it was clear that Ukraine targeted the plane using an American Patriot air defense system. Accordingly, he called for an international probe into the incident, which Moscow claims took the lives of 65 Ukrainian prisoners of war and 9 Russian crew members. Ukraine, for its part, has yet to clarify its role in the crash. Meanwhile, the European Union is bracing for an internal battle seeking long-term funding for Ukraine amid the country's defense operation against Russian invasion. Our Yoon explains.
On Thursday, leaders of the 27 member states of the European Union will meet in Brussels for a discussion on bringing Hungary on board to unlock around $54 billion of funding for Ukraine. The EU is pushing for a more stable financing plan for Ukraine through to 2027, moving away from the complex, costly, and less predictable financing system that has been used. The EU has been helping Ukraine since Moscow invaded in 2022, but so far it has been through intergovernmental deals that require national approvals every year and are more costly and complex than funding through the EU budget. Using an EU budget calls for a unanimous vote from the 27 member states, but due to close ties with Moscow, Hungary has continued to delay agreements within the EU bloc. Hungary wants support to be reviewed annually, which EU officials say will allow Budapest to veto each time. This has kept the other 26 EU countries and Hungary in a standoff since December, with leaders gathering in the hope of finding a resolution. This summit may be the last opportunity to unlock funding for Ukraine, which is expected to run out of cash to run normal state functions in March. Ahead of the EU summit, farmers across the EU blocked traffic arteries across Belgium, France, and Italy on Wednesday with their tractors as they seek better prices for their produce and less bureaucracy in their work. The protests had an immediate impact. The European Commission announced plans to shield farmers from cheap exports from Ukraine during wartime and allow farmers to use some land that had been forced to lie fallow for environmental reasons. Meanwhile, on Wednesday, Russian President Vladimir Putin said that Ukraine had used a U.S.-supplied Patriot air defense system to shoot down a Russian military transport plane last week, saying that it killed all 74 people on board and demanded an international investigation into the incident. Ukraine has neither confirmed nor denied that it downed the plane and has demanded proof of who was on board. Yoon, Arirang News.
Behind every great Olympic event is a great Olympic organizer, and the latest Youth Winter Games in Gangwon province are no exception. My colleague Jin has this report.
안녕하세요. 반갑습니다. 2024 강원 동계 청소년올림픽 공동조직위원장 진종호입니다. 반갑습니다.
As a four-time Olympic gold medalist, Jin Jong-oh is an Olympic legend. He was the first athlete to win gold in 3 consecutive Olympic shooting events, having done so from 2008 to 2016. Nowadays, he has a different kind of target, leading the Gangwon 2024 organizing committee alongside former speed skater Lee Sang-hwa.
When I competed in the Olympics as an athlete, I just received the services, food and beverages that were provided. In this role, I've tried to listen to the athletes, take into account their preferences and needs.
Even before announcing his retirement last December, Jin was already involved in sports administration. He completed his master's degree in physical education and is pursuing his PhD. He also served as a director for the Korean Sports and Olympic Committee.
As an athlete, I only knew how to compete, but didn't know how the competitions were organized. Working on my degree, I learned about the importance of helping to ensure that the athletes and referees can do their jobs without any disruptions.
Throughout the games, Jin had no time to spare, checking on athletes, competition venues, and the staff. He especially expressed deep gratitude toward the volunteers. Jin himself worked as a volunteer during the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics.
Our volunteers are truly the best. In this cold weather, outdoors or indoors, what they're doing, such as traffic control and guidance, is just admirable.
Despite his busy schedule, he's taken the time to cheer on the young athletes.
Before the games, I saw them as teenagers, but once the games started, their attitude and concentration have been just incredible, almost to the point where it was hard to tell them apart from adults.
After Gangwon 2024, Jin hopes his home province of Gangwon-do can leverage its two-time Olympic hosting experience.
I'm hoping we can make better use of the venues from Pyeongchang 2018 and Gangwon 2024. Maybe host more local and international competitions. It would be great if the younger generation and those in the sports scene contribute to carrying on this legacy.
As for his personal goals, he aims to contribute to the improvement of Korea's sports industry. That's because he's still deeply in love with sports.
My journey has come to an end as an athlete, but now I'm walking a new path as a coach and sports administrator. I've lived the life of an athlete, so I want to be someone who continues to love and support athletes until the very end.
With Gangwon 2024 nearing its end, this is his message for everyone involved.
Thanks to you, Gangwon 2024 has shown how South Korea truly loves and is dedicated to sports. To the athletes, this is the beginning of your journey, a stage for you to dream. I hope you enjoy the games to the fullest and share your love for sports with the world.
여러분들이 주인공입니다. 여러분들이.
송유진, 아리랑 뉴스, 강릉.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. In the US, Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg apologized to families of young victims affected by social media use at a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing on Wednesday. The hearing began with recorded testimony from both the families and those directly affected by exposure to exploitation on social media, which led to suicide or self-harm. In a heated and emotional question and answer session with Zuckerberg, Republican Missouri Senator Josh Hawley asked the Meta boss to apologize to the families of victims who held up the pictures of their children. Zuckerberg said no one should go through such an experience and that he is sorry for everything you have all been through. He added that Meta is continuing its efforts to protect children online. Meta is being sued by dozens of states for addictive features on Instagram and Facebook and for failing to protect youths from online predators. The CEOs of TikTok, X, Snap, and Discord also attended the hearing. A judge in Delaware on Tuesday nullified Tesla CEO and tech billionaire Elon Musk's record-breaking $56 billion compensation package, saying that the board had failed to prove that the compensation plan was fair to Tesla shareholders. Judge Kathleen McCormick said that the deal was unfathomable, ruling that the $55.8 billion pay deal awarded to Elon Musk in 2018 should be cancelled. In a lawsuit filed by Tesla shareholder Richard Tornetta, it was claimed that Elon Musk was being overpaid and that shareholders were not given adequate information on how easily the CEO's performance targets could be met. The 2018 compensation package was the biggest ever in US corporate history, pushing Elon Musk onto the top of the world's wealth list. Malaysia's Sultan Ibrahim Iskandar of the southern state of Johor was sworn in as the country's new king on Wednesday. Sultan Ibrahim took his oath of office in a ceremony witnessed by Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, cabinet members, and other members of the royal family at the National Palace in Kuala Lumpur. The 65-year-old billionaire sultan is the nation's 17th king under Malaysia's unique rotating monarchy system. 9 ethnic Malay state rulers have taken turns as king for 5-year terms since Malaysia's independence from Britain in 1957, in what is believed to be the only such system in the world. While the king's role has been largely ceremonial, as a protector of Islam and Malay tradition, the new king, Sultan Ibrahim, has said he was not keen on becoming a puppet king, saying that he is with the over 30 million people of Malaysia and not the politicians. Sultan Ibrahim Iskandar has an estimated net worth of over $5 billion from an extensive business empire ranging from real estate to telecoms and power plants. A long-thought-lost portrait by Austrian painter Gustav Klimt recently surfaced after 100 years. One of Klimt's last works, the portrait of Fräulein Lisa, is expected to fetch as much as $86 million at an auction in Vienna later this year. The managing director of the Im Kinski auction house called the reappearance of the artwork a wild sensation. The current owner says they've had the painting since the 1960s. It will go under the hammer at the end of April. Kim Seong, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. It's another day of needing a quality face mask. The new month kicks off with dusty conditions. Incheon is under an ultra-fine dust advisory. What's most concerning in terms of weather today, though, is snow for the East Coast. The east of Gangwon province could see more than 15 centimeters of heavy snowfall through tomorrow morning, with a preliminary snow advisory issued there. So athletes in Pyeongchang and Gangneung will see heavy snow, and sub-zero temperatures in Pyeongchang will freeze snow coating the roads, so please walk with care outside. After the highs are 3 to 10 degrees lower this afternoon, topping out at 7 degrees Celsius here in the capital and over in Gwangju. Daejeon and Gyeongju should see a high of 8 degrees. Meanwhile, rain in southern provinces should let up in the afternoon, while Jeju will see on and off rain through Saturday. Central regions remain dry, while the rest of the country will see frequent rain or snow through the next 5 days. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
And those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. We have our panel session coming up right after this break, so do stay with us. Thank you for now.